When I was a little boy growing up in a refugee camp in Gaza, I used to hear my parents and their friends and neighbors refer to international law as ink on paper. When it comes to Palestine, of course, حبر على ورق, they used to say. As I grew older, I understood what this reference is all about. International law doesn't matter whatsoever when it comes to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians in Gaza and what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians for the last 75 years. Now, when Russia declared its special military operation in the Donbass region in Ukraine in February of 2022, international law somehow became very relevant. The International Criminal Court, within 1 week of that war, opened an investigations into whether war crimes have been committed. A year later, precisely in March 2023, they issued an arrest warrant of Russia's President Vladimir Putin. At the time, the German Chancellor Scholz had made a statement that was quite interesting and relevant today. He said, "No one is above the law, not even Vladimir Putin himself." Yet Scholz and all of those other supporters of international law in Washington, Brussels, Madrid, Paris, and everywhere else in the West has turned a blind eye to what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. And what they are doing is a genocide. In fact, Scholz has said, Israel is not yet ready for a ceasefire. We do not support permanent ceasefire. Nearly 5,000 Palestinian children have been killed since the beginning of the war. And sadly, many more will be killed until Israel is convinced that there is no other alternative but a ceasefire. So what is the point of international law when it only applies to Russia and African countries and doesn't apply in the United States, in Iraq, or in Israel, in Gaza, or in France, in Mali, and so forth and so on? So it is actually ink on paper. In fact, I think it's worse than ink on paper, because when it's ink on paper, at least it exists in some sort of a moral argument, philosophical argument about the relevance of international law. None of these Western capitals are even talking about international law. It is irrelevant even as an intellectual conversation about international law. Now, what is really interesting about all of this is that some people are still talking about international law as if it's relevant, and unfortunately it is not. It is a political document that is being used and manipulated by the West when it applies to their enemies, and it's completely ignored and overlooked when it comes to their friends, such as war criminals, Gallant, Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, and all others. So it is really, at the end of the day, حبر على ورق.